Welcome back to the Eric Krown crypto channel. Wishing you a happy daily start to this very boring Saturday morning. Very little's happened in the last 24 hours, but Bitcoin to explode. Yes, that's right. Some explosive action, busting through all sorts of barriers and nonsense. And well, I figure today is a good time to be following up on some long-term charts that we've been intermittently looking at on this channel over the past year now, calling for the low 40% on Bitcoin dominance to very likely be a macro low. And as Bitcoin dominance does now kind of peak back above 47%, I think that it's time to get back into it, see, what the major things to be aware of are. And of course, whenever we talk about, Bitcoin dominance, we're talking about Bitcoin versus altcoin pairing. So I want to say at the outset that this is, of course, not saying that every altcoin Bitcoin pair is going to be, in alignment with the analysis here, but the majority very likely are going to be. And then of course there's going to be some, some one-offs here and there because altcoins are just, they can be magical like that, I suppose. Anyways, let's just jump right into it, starting off with the bi-weekly time frame for Bitcoin dominance. And in this case, we can see that the bi-weekly time frame has not only reclaimed the bottom side of the Gaussian channel right here, but is knocking on the door of the mean band, the same mean band that has the same implications that we've been looking at on Bitcoin itself. And you can see that that is quite literally just about exactly where it's pivoted right now with 1 day left to closure. So it will get a new open on Sunday, or by Sunday's closure, I suppose. It's a better way of saying it. And then the question is, does Bitcoin dominance close above that mean band or not? If it does, then very likely we're going to see the next few months work its way up to the top side of the band, which is, guess where? In the low 50%, slowly inching towards our long-term macro target, which was in the deep 50s, somewhere between about 58 to 62% long-term. But of course, one thing before the next, and this is why I bring up this chart yet again, because this would be, within probably the deciding point within the next 2 to 4 weeks, I'd say at most. We would expect this to bust on through and actually bust all the way up to the top side of the band, relatively soon after that, relative to this time frame, which is a bi-weekly. So, we're talking like 4 to maybe 8 weeks, something like that would probably be about right. Anyways, moving on now, I did want to get into the monthly time frame and follow up on this because guess what? We did see that the monthly jewel continued with its upside momentum, got a pretty damn good signal over here, supported by DMI starting in February. And yes, this one's still active, still available, and still suggests that it probably does have some more upside, probably somewhere around the bottom side of the Gaussian channel for the monthly here, which is about low 50s, basically, just over 50%, it looks like. So very likely a test there, very likely a pullback there as well. So you can kind of see, where we're likely going to see a bit of short-term pullbacks and whatnot relative to the time frame. But of course, it starts off with the bi-weekly, that then ignites the relevance of the monthly right here, and then we can, take that onwards and forwards, especially if the monthly starts to close back in the bottom side of the Gaussian channel at 50%. That would start to look pretty damn good for the very, very long-term targets at 58+% to very likely be ignited. But moving on from there, I did also want to, or I think I did say that yes, it is supported by DMI on the monthly jewel, and then also we can see that monthly volatility is coming off of one of the lowest levels that we've ever seen ever for for this particular asset, or I don't necessarily think it's an asset, but this ticker here. And of course, what would that imply? That implies that we're likely going to be looking at one of the biggest expansive and explosive moves on this particular asset as well. To put this in perspective, the last time that we saw, comparatively low was coming off of this area here, which I'll mark off. And that obviously was getting the last major move to the downside. So, volatility is obviously direction neutral, but it does speak towards the effect coming off of the overall consolidation. And in this case, that did, prelude the last major 40% breakdown crash in Bitcoin dominance, which was obviously very, very good for altcoin Bitcoin pairings. But we're likely going to see something similar, but in the opposite direction here for the for the remainder of the year, I'd probably say. Moving on to stochastic momentum, we can see that the monthly stochastic momentum continues to remain with upside pressure. That remains consistent as long as Bitcoin is closing the monthly above 40.25%. About right now, Bitcoin's trading more than 7% above that particular pivot. Again, this month might be a bit of a pullback in April, but May, June very likely does see this one continue onwards and forwards here. And then also did have a bit of regular bullish evidence come off of this low versus this low right here. but not that important on stochastic momentum, at least in my opinion. So getting back into it over here, you can see that I've drawn up on my charts a little bit. I don't typically, I try not to do that, too much anymore. But in this case, you do have a bit of a technical low here, right? You do have a W bottom or a double bottom or whatever the fuck you want to call it. What essentially is it? It's consolidation. Whenever you have a consolidation, you have a potential formation. In this case, you can call this many different things. I would just call it a box. It's a fucking box, man. It's the old box. It's the old rectangle. And essentially, if Bitcoin does bust out the top side of it, there is a measure move to be made off of something like this. And it's very likely going to be somewhere around, guess where? Oh, what do you fucking know? The mean band on the monthly, which is just above 58% as of right now. Also confluent with the 618 Fibonacci retracement right here as well. Now, long term, I do think that things could work their way higher from there. This would be like maybe years down the road now. But ultimately, this would be a very, very good area for a long-term high before coming back down and trying for a higher low somewhere above about 49 to 50%. And at that point, maybe like a couple years down the road, perhaps, this the low mid 60s becomes relevant. But for right now, relatively short-term, 2-week time frame, finding its areas right around about 47.5%. If you see the closure above there by tomorrow night, again for the bi-weekly, at that point I'd be looking for the next month or two to work their way up towards the 51 to 52% pivot. Probably a bit of a pullback, consolidation, so on and so forth from there. And then very likely, if the monthly closes within that region, I'd be looking over the next few months, probably into end of summer, for that next major move to the upside. So what essentially does that mean for the greater market in its whole? Well, it doesn't mean much for the US dollar valuations, because the Bitcoin dominance going up can happen multiple ways, obviously. It can happen, one, if Bitcoin is just outpacing altcoins to the upside versus their US dollar values, which obviously would, still be generally good for everything, as they're, all going up. Going up is good. But on the other hand, could it be that, could we also see a massive crash in Bitcoin versus US dollar, and then the altcoins just, crash more? Yeah, that's possible as well. So there's not really a comment on what happens versus the US dollar valuations. I think my opinions on that are a little bit more, obviously directed in the Bitcoin videos, but at least long term here. But ultimately, altcoins versus Bitcoin, I do think it's going to be very, it's going to continue to be very, very difficult for altcoin Bitcoin pairings, probably in the next couple of years. Yes, it's going to be ebbs and flows. Yes, obviously, but we're talking about very, very high term timeframes here. And ultimately, I do think that I still remain with my position that this is a macro low, and I still remain with my position that this one is very likely to work its way into the deep 50s, maybe low 60s long term. And at that point, maybe we do see, a high or something of this sort. But what does that mean in the short term? Well, if Bitcoin does kind of continue on with its rampage, as I've kind of alluded to, or at least what I think is more likely as of right now, in the more, in like the next 3 to 4 months or so, I do think that Bitcoin is we're probably going to see one of those situations similar to like 2017 or 2019, early 2019, I should say, where Bitcoin just ran so fucking fast that altcoins got absolutely decimated versus their Bitcoin value, and did participate a little bit to the upside versus their US dollar value, but it certainly wasn't the it certainly wasn't the play, if you will, at least in my opinion. At least that's my stance. And of course, you're free to make whatever you want from that particular analysis. And I think that's a good place maybe leaving off on this particular one as well. I do want to once again give highlight to the Bybit promotion going on, because I got 0% on maker fees for derivative contract orders. If you follow the directions in the link in the description below, you can even get the Joule for free for the first 30 days. Again, if you follow the directions. And yeah, I think that's enough shilling for one day. I want to say take care, much love, and see you hopefully soon.